All right, good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to this evening's Design Review Board. We'll begin with roll call, please.
Thank you. I'll be doing this tonight. Board Member Coveney,
Here.
Board Member Weil,
Here.
Board Member Gibbs,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Neve.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a special guest. Kellen, would you like to lead us in the pledge, please? You stand up and put your hand over your heart. Go ahead. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, bud.
Good job. Thank you, Kellen. Okay, that's Kellen Weil. So, okay, now we will go ahead and go with public communication. This is to address any item that may not be on the agenda this evening. And any members of the public that would like to speak on anything on your mind. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Hello, members of the Design Review Board. My name is Nikki Stone and I live at 1317 Circle Way, property that is
Oh, okay,
adjacent.
excuse me. I'm going to stop you right
Okay.
there. That item is on the agenda. If you're talking about
Yes,
the
Thank you.
cliff, okay, so you'll have an opportunity to speak. Okay, so then we'll move right into the order. Maybe I should have done that first. So what we'll do, I had asked anybody that would like to speak on any item that's not on the agenda to speak. Now, as we move into our regular agenda items, we will have the consent calendar. And then following that, we'll get into our individual items. The staff will present the project, and then the applicant will have 5 minutes, to go over the full project. And then any member of the public at that time will be able to speak for 3 minutes. Following that, then the applicant will also have an additional 3 minutes to wrap up. Then we will close the public communication, and the board will then ask questions and deliberate. And if anyone has consternation with our decision, then you can certainly have 14 days to appeal. So I think I've covered everything. Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and I don't think there are any modifications to the agenda order.
There are not.
Okay,
And just to report, there were also no minutes on the consent calendar tonight.
that's right. Okay, so we don't have anything for the consent calendar, so we'll move right on into regular business. And with that, item number 5.1, 10 Camel Point Drive. This is a request for a continuance. And is it continue to a date certain?
They have submitted a request to continue to December 12th.
December 12th.
Mhm.
Okay, so may I have a motion? Well, first of all, is there anyone that would like, from the audience, that would like to speak on this agenda item on 10 Camel Point?
Can we have a discussion on this?
Of course. Okay, there's no one from the public that would like to speak on that, then,
I'm sorry, just note for the record that Ms. Coveney needs to recuse herself from this
oh,
vote.
okay. Okay. Okay, Ms. Coveney has recused herself from this item. And Member Weil, did you have a question or can?
So I think my only question is, I don't think we've seen a continuance for this far out in a long time. Traditionally, we'd table to a date uncertain, which would trigger a renotice. I'd only be comfortable continuing to this date if we renotice, because neighbors won't be notified of the next hearing that far out.
And this project's going to be a controversial project. I think, and I had a question, I'm glad you asked it, Louis. We need to make sure the neighbors have called me about that to make sure they get the notice. Actually, they didn't call me, they emailed me. So if that's correct, then I think it should be to a date to be determined.
So did we want to open the public meeting? I know the applicant's not with us tonight, but was there a representative?
Is there a representative for the applicant this evening?
It is at the board's discretion, but you might want to
Certainly.
offer the
certainly.
opportunity to comment on that.
Okay.
Steve Colartani. Louis, you're right. That is kind of pushing it on the calendar, but the applicant is going to be traveling. And I think it's probably only prudent that we renotice, as Tom
Mhm.
suggested.
Mhm.
So we'll accept that.
Table to a date uncertain?
No, we want the date certain of December 12th, but we'll renotice in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so
Wait,
then,
does staff, does that work? Or should we do it to a date? to be determined?
Traditionally, we would do a table to a date uncertain, and then we would work with the applicant to bring it back on December 12th. In this case, I think we are all committed to the December 12th date, so I will add to the calendar that it needs to be renoticed prior to that.
So you're fine with letting it go to continuing it to December 12th,
Yes,
and then staff will make sure it's renoticed?
we will make it renoticed.
That works for me.
okay, so can I get a motion?
I'll move item number 5.1, continue to December 12th, 2024, with the condition that the project will be renoticed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Oh, you got it.
Or
Roll call, please.
Amber, you doing roll call?
Board Member Coveney is not present. So Board Member Weil,
yes,
Board Member Gibbs,
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Neve.
Yes,
That is a 3-0 approval.
thank you. Okay. Now we'll move on to item 5.2 at 1360 Cliff Drive. And Board Member Cupney has rejoined us for the record. And
ex parte.
please, do we have ex parte?
Chair Neve,
Yes.
I spoke with Justin, the neighbor, Horst, the applicant, Steve Coritani, and the property owner. It's right there. I forgot to-
Nikki and,
No, no.
oh,
Neil Desai.
oh,
Sorry.
Neil.
And then I did speak with Nicole and Jim on the phone.
And I met with Horst Knoppenberger, Nicole and Jim Stepani, Steve Caratani, Neil Desai, did I say it right? And also Justin Stone.
Okay, I met with Horst and the applicant owners. I also met with Justin Stone and with Neil Desai.
And I met with, sounds like the same group with Horst, spoke with the applicants, with Nicole and Jim, with Steve Coritani, with Neil, and with Justin Stone. Okay, so with that, Mr. Latham.
Thank you, Chair Neve. Item 5.2 is for a project at 1360 Cliff Drive. It is a request for design review, a coastal development permit, and a revocable encroachment permit for a new single-family home. The site is currently vacant, although there was an approval in 2021 for a 5,000 square foot house. And since then, that approval has expired. The proposed project is a new 3,900 square foot house with a 1,500 square foot garage, 4 cars, in a tandem function form. This site is an R1 residential low density zone, and the coastal development permit is required as it is an appealable area and it is a new single family home. And there is also an accessory dwelling unit proposed component part of this project that is exempt from design review. The applicant is also requesting the revocable encroachment permit to construct and maintain landscape planters and decorative pavers in the public right-of-way. And here are some elevations of the project. This is showing the revocable encroachment permit area, and the sidewalk in red, and the green is the REP area. And then in orange is the easement for the power lines. And then I just wanted to point out that a part of the design review approval would be for tandem parking. Since the project is over 3,600 square feet, it would require at least 3 parking spaces to be provided. They are providing 4 with this proposal, and the tandem function or setup is required to have design review approval. And staff did receive view equity concerns from neighbors and also identified view equity as a concern in the staff report. Staff is recommending a conditional no approval of the proposed project. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, now the applicant, you have 5 minutes.
Hi there. Oh, wow. Hi, really hi. I'm Nicole Stepanian. My husband Jim and I are the owners of 1360 Cliff Drive. I think we've had a chance to either speak with or meet each of you in person. So thank you so much for your time in just reviewing our project and hearing our perspectives. Jim and I purchased the lot in early 2022 of January, and shortly thereafter, we engaged Horst Architects to help us redesign something that was really personal for us because it is going to be our forever home. And we'll live there with our 2 children and my mother-in-law, who's a recent widow. During the process, we've been super diligent with John Tilton and just making sure that we're presenting something that is a conforming package to each of you. We also believe we have been highly, highly accommodating with all the neighbors. We've had multiple meetings with each and every surrounding neighbor and have done our utmost to accommodate all the personal requests and, are available at any time. Again, we have been extremely communicative. And we've also mentioned that we are paying for privately and organizing the removal of the telephone poles and undergrounding those wires, which we believe will be of incredible value to all the properties around us. So I thank you so much. Looking forward to approval and for us getting down here and moving into our dream home. And I will pass it on to Horst.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, good evening, board members and city staff. I'm Horst Knoppenberger, the architect working with Jim and Nicole Stepanian on this beautiful site and what I think is the heart of Laguna Beach. We have a presentation, Ashley, or is that coming from you, Daniel?
Yes, I'll.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So, and Daniel, thank you for the very detailed, presentation. One of the things that Daniel didn't mention, there were quite a few letters that came from adjacent property owners, and one of the things I really loved about this process with Jim and Nicole is they did reach out to their neighbors, and and not just once. We had several neighborhood meetings, and all of the concerns were taken into consideration. So let's go to the next slide, please, Daniel. So the lot is 10,000, little over 10,000 square feet. And as Daniel mentioned, we're proposing a house just under 4,000 square feet. So the 40% habitable floor area being proposed to lot size is consistent with the pattern of development. As Nicole alluded to, the overall site planning for the residence is similar to the project that was approved by the Design Review Board September 23rd, 2021. Essentially, we've sort of, split the house into 2 pieces, an ADU on top of the garage, and then the main house further back on the property. The current design is no more than, 2 stories at any point on the property. Let's go to the next slide, please, Daniel. One of the things, so this is the front elevation, and so there's a couple things that are notable here. We wanted to push back we did push back the upper level 20 feet so that the house would read as essentially a single story house from the street with the ADU pushed back. Through that entry gate to the left of the garage doors, there's a series of courtyards along the southwest property line. Those courtyards culminate into a pool and a terrace and kind of a C-shaped main house. The courtyard was designed to, provide, exterior living space, for the property owners, but we also saw an opportunity to mitigate the appearance of mass and scale through the courtyards. The previous design approved by the Design Review Board was much more up against the south side yard setback, which is 6 feet. In terms of neighborhood compatibility, we did, before we started this design, Jim and Nicole, may have mentioned that, one of their concerns with the previous design is it was designed by the same architect who designed the mixed-use building, the adjacent mixed-use building, and the architecture looked a lot like that building. And so Jim and Nicole were, looking for something, more original. And so we tried to reflect in the architecture the warm, tactile, quality of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is looking at the casita. You can see the underside of the roof is wood. Our ceiling heights are 9 feet at the casita and 9 feet on the upper level, and you can see the courtyard along the southwest property line. Is that it, or is it goes so fast?
I know it does go fast. You will have an opportunity, how many more slides do you have since we do have it, since this is. the
Oh,
only
just
issue?
really 2 more. I can.
Okay,
go
you know
very-
what? Go ahead and
go
go
very
ahead and
quickly,
finish. Go ahead and
through them.
finish. Yeah, because
So just a couple, we separated the building, the casita from the main building with this end courtyard with this tree well. We thought that would help to kind of break up the overall scale of the residence because it's a very long property. And then maybe I should say, in conclusion, we did have several meetings with the Desais, who are the representatives of the owners of the and Steve Quarbertani. We understand their concerns on the northward extension of the upper level. We tried to reach an agreement on that, and weren't able to. And I know we're going to be talking about that in the rebuttal, but the issue, or the challenge for us is that the only real ocean view for the subject property is at that north end, and we'll go into that a little bit more. So we're trying to find some balance and sort of strike that balance between view equity, and we'll talk more about that. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move to public comments. So who would like to go first? I see a few people in our audience.
Good evening. Let's try this again. Members of the Design Review Board, my name is Nikki Stone. I live at Circle Way with my husband and my 2-year-old son, and hopefully one more on the way. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I know that you've had the opportunity to meet with my husband in the past week. Apologies that I missed all those meetings. I was working. We're very concerned about our privacy and about the scale of this project. Hopefully, when you came out, you were able to see how glaring and obvious it was. We did try to work things out, but we couldn't get on the same page and clarify exactly what it was that we were agreeing to, which is why we decided to leave it up to you guys. We hope that you'll find a reasonable solution, and I guess what we're proposing is to push back the deck and the roof by 5 feet and allow us to grow our trees to like 16.5 or 17 feet, which represents like the halfway point on their deck. We do feel like our privacy outweighs possibly cutting into a potential ocean view that doesn't exist right now from the living space. Obviously, when they're on the deck, they would still have it, but in the living space, they'd probably not have it because of the trees. And then I just want to note that we are 7 to 8 feet below our height maximum above that roof that the proposed ocean view would be. And we were hoping to originally expand there as our family grows, but obviously that's not the case. So we just want to ask for something reasonable here. And we obviously will not be expanding in that direction. So I think that's it.
Thank you.
Can you cue me up,
Oh, yes.
Daniel?
Yeah.
Good evening, Chair Neve, board members and staff. My name is Steve Quarbertani. And I want to thank the board for meeting Neil and myself this afternoon. I'm sorry, during this week. Really was great. I'm here representing the Desai family who own the mixed use project, which is right next door. And I also want to correct the record. I had inadvertently identified Nicole and her husband as the owners that we had dealt with earlier, and that was incorrect. It was Mr. Flynn. So I do want to correct that. And I also want to echo what's been said by Horst and the other neighbor. The applicants, Jim and Nicole, have been very accessible. They're nice people, and we just fell a little short on getting a deal done, but hopefully with the board's help, we'll be able to do so. And I also want to make a note, we're only here for view equity. I think the project is stunning. Horst is just a great architect. It's a super project. And I want to bring your attention to my exhibit that I have up there. So this project is 14 feet, actually 14 feet and change back towards the rear of the property. And that's a problem for us because that means the second story is over 13 feet further back as well. And when you visit it, that's what's creating the view issue. And if it was cited in a similar manner to what we saw originally that was approved by Debbie and Louis, I don't think I'd even be here. I'd be supporting the project. And I also want to note that the original design had 6,439 square feet of overall program, total program, and the applicant is proposing 7,813 square feet of total program. Next slide, please. So these are the images that you saw, and the images at the top are from the dining room, and you can see we're losing a lot of view. The second one is from the bedroom, and the third is from the deck area. I don't believe the view equity has been achieved. I believe if Horst and I had been left to our own devices without clients, we'd probably have a deal. But we both have to answer to masters. So I think we're close and look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, seeing no one, back to you.
Great, thank you. So, just in terms of, Nikki's and her family's concern, we had a couple meetings with them, several months ago, and all those meetings were very positive. It was our understanding that they were in complete support of the project. And there's no, there's no problem with, maybe, having a change of heart or a change of mind. I mean, that does happen. So we didn't really hear of their additional or their new concerns until just a couple days ago. So we try to work very quickly. We can definitely pull the upper level roof back, 2 feet. But in terms of the deck that projects toward their property, it's only 5 foot 6 inches deep right now. So to eliminate 5 feet of it. So I wish we would have had a chance to communicate some of these things with Nikki and her lovely family. But like I say, kind of came at the 11th hour. Always a pleasure working with Steve. We were so close, to getting an agreement. Can we see one of the next slide, please, Daniel? I just want to use that slide. One of the things about the Desai property, and you may have noticed, in fact, one of the board members mentioned, why would they have, residential units on both ends of the property? Well, the reason is because they have an expansive ocean view on both ends of their property. The south end of their property, they're going to have an amazing ocean view, and it's a better ocean view than they would have had with the previous design on the subject site because our roof over the casita is 3 feet lower. So that view is going to be tremendous once Mark Gissemi trims his hedge. Let's go a little bit more further, Daniel, a couple more slides, a little bit more. That one right there. So this is the previous one, please. This is the view I took from the Desai property, months ago. And, Mr. Gissemi has not trimmed his hedge yet, but you can see through that hedge, there's, once that hedge is trimmed, and that was a condition of their design review approval, there's going to be an amazing view from the south. The Stepanians do not have that view, especially with the casita being set so far back from the site. Next slide, please. The only view from the upper level of the Stepanian house is that view right there. I took this picture from the Desai property about the same level as our finished floor. It's a very limited view, but it is a cherished view, you know, for the Stepanians. So what we've done is we've located the most important part of our program, the family room and the kitchen, opposite that view over the low roof of Nikki and her family's roof. So that is their only view. And we understand, you know, view equity is the responsibility of the applicant to do what is possible to preserve the existing views while not being denied equal access to their views. So all that we're asking of the Desai's and the Design Review Board this evening is equal access. That is their only view. If we, you know, we could, you know, we looked at pulling the upper level back 6 feet, and we met with Steve and the Desai's, but you could see what it does. The further we pull the upper level back to the south, we find ourselves, you know, right where the higher roof is on Nikki's house, and then to the left of that is vegetation that we have no control over the height of that vegetation because those folks didn't go to design review. There was no trimming requirements placed upon them. Maybe in the future they'll go to design review. So that's where we are. It was, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Jim. One thing that's noteworthy that I don't believe I spoke to you guys about in the last few days is if you look at where the pool is at in our courtyard, in the prior plan that was approved, that was all structure, that was all program. So by having a pool there, it actually enhances some privacy and some sense of separation for the Stones and some of the neighbors over there. So we just feel like we've exhausted our efforts to accommodate you know, the Desai's and the Stones to the best of our ability. But I think that's noteworthy that in the new design, there's a pool and a courtyard there where that all used to be structure in the prior approved plan. So I just wanted to make mention of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so now we will close the public hearing and we will move to questions. Board? Okay.
I just have one question regarding landscaping between the Stones and your project. There was a request by the Stones, both when I met with them and when tonight, to relieve them from their height restriction on, I think they're podocarpus, but they might be ficus, I don't remember, height limitation that was imposed as a condition when their plan was approved. And I've checked with staff and you can affirm it. So my first question to staff is, can we grant or can we relieve the Stones of that condition or modify that condition to allow for an increase in height in those trees?
The Stones are welcome to apply for that amendment to their design review approval. The limitation of those trees was 12 feet
But we
on
can't
their
do it tonight.
landscape plan, but that project site is not currently before you, so it is not in your purview tonight.
Okay, thank you. Then I turn to your plans, Horst, and maybe you're kind of jumping to talk about it, but I noticed that there's podocarpus all along there.
Yes.
And what I'd like you to do is explain the height of that podocarpus and how that's going to, in your opinion, soften the mass scale that the Stones face from their backyard. And in addition, would you be willing to grow those? Usually we say it's got to be to a maximum height. I think would be something, it would be between a minimum and maximum height, such as, I think the request was 16 or 17 feet. So I'm interested in what your thoughts are on that, Horst.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great solution. I'd just have to, confirm that with Nicole and Jim. I mean, podocarpus hedges can get quite tall. And some of those hedges are podocarpus. So, for me at least, I would think that what might be comfortable for Jim and Nicole is that we grow the podocarpus to a height of maybe 2 feet above the finished floor of their upper level, so that when they're sitting down, they still have that, that little ocean view. I mean, does that sound about right?
I think If I may, just one thing that we're concerned about, and I don't even know what type of photo we have, but you've all seen the lot. If you see from our perspective, it's going to end up just being this massive wall, from north to south of just these massive trees. And so for us, it feels a little closed in that concept. So I can't say what the height would be, but for sure we would be aware of it and we can.
I'm actually talking about making it a condition of approval.
Gotcha.
And I'm not talking about the whole distance. I'm only talking, so the question to Horst is just the area, the distance of the stone lot,
Property, okay.
right? So Horst, can you tell me how high those trees would be at 2 feet above the deck floor? The second story.
I
deck floor.
can, might just take me just a second to look at this.
The second story deck
Okay.
floor. There's a second story deck that comes off their living room, kitchen area. The upper level.
Does 103.4,
Yeah, so the finished floors, you're correct, 103.4. And height of grade along the property line, that's what I'm looking.
finished floor of the first level is 91.9.
Is it 91.9?
It's around 90. So if grade is 90, our finished
13
floor
plus
is
2.
101, it would be like 11 plus 2 is like 13, yes.
Like 13?
13 feet above existing grade at the property line.
Okay, give me a second. I may have another question about that. I want to make sure that I've exhausted that issue. So 2 feet above.
And
Okay. hold on a second.
Jim and Nicole would, I may have been a little bit ambitious with that. They would like to go maintain the hedge at their finished floor height. And that's 90 plus 1, 11 feet, 11 feet, 12 feet.
Okay, so the request is 17 feet by them. You're asking for
Yeah.
how many feet?
12 feet, 17 feet would put the
I'm hearing
hedge
you. I just
above eye
want to know
level,
what
yeah.
range we have. We'll get into
Yeah, 12
deliberation.
feet, please.
So you're somewhere between, you're at 12 and what I've heard from the Stones was 17 and it's in full disclosure. At my meeting with Justin Stone, I believe he requested 14 feet. So we get all the numbers out, but I appreciate that. And it would be a full line of photocarpus to block that,
Yes.
that look, because it is quite open. Okay, I have no further questions.
Chair, I got a question. Is that all right?
Yes, go ahead.
Daniel, can you pull up A2.1? I want to talk about the REP zone, if that's all right, and the sidewalk. And I mentioned this to Horst at the site, that the Desai property that's one up has a full-length sidewalk, and then the project just down below, I'm not sure Horst realized that even though there's a planter and that kind of stuff, part of their condition was to add a sidewalk. And my question is going to be, there's width that could be expanded in the sidewalk that's up to the property line. I would like to see that happen, but leaving your plantings along the curb
Yes.
is fine. If you're amenable to that, that's what I would propose, is that the sidewalk and then just your steps get pushed back and the driveway starts on your property line.
Yeah, the sidewalk did come up as a plan check correction through Public Works when we were going through zoning. And right now, where the sidewalk is 4 feet wide, and we do have at least 3 feet between the inside edge of the sidewalk and the property line.
A more full expansive one would be encouraged.
Like
So
5 feet might be nice. 2 people could walk side by side comfortably in 5 feet.
I believe the Desai one goes all the way to their, like, the starts on the property line. And they do have the planter space that you're kind of showing on yours. So I'd like to see it start on the edge of the property line and the full right of way pedestrian walking
Okay.
be allowed, because it would carry through your property and it, you guys, because then it's less liability for having,
That would be about
What?
7 feet, I think.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, 7 feet, you think that.
I mean, if you look at the plans that are on the board, from where the sidewalk ends to where the property line is what I would say is the extension. If that's 3 feet, is what
Mhm.
Horst
About
is
3
suggesting,
feet,
that's
yes.
looking like it's pretty close.
Okay.
So it'd be just a full width sidewalk from that expansion.
Does
Does that make sense, Daniel?
Because,
Full width of
To like based on the proposal, from that spot all the way to the property line would be sidewalk. They'd still have the curb cut in the driveway, but
Yeah.
it would all be the same material through the driveway as a sidewalk, just like any other property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds nice, because as we were waiting for the board members, people go speeding down that street. It's
And
really crazy.
there's
It'd
a
be
lot
nice to
of-
have like a pedestrian.
There's a lot of
safe
pedestrian
harbor.
traffic, especially in the summer. You may not have seen it over the winter, cars. Obviously, there's 2 public parking spaces in front of this house. That's a second question that I have behind here. So if the sidewalk is acceptable, I would propose that change for this evening. Daniel, as far as the public parking spots, obviously the properties afforded access to their property, but how do we treat that in terms of coastal commission? Because this is on the ocean word of the major street for there are 2 paid parking spots currently on this site. How do those get reshuffled through this proposal?
So- Thanks, Daniel.
Of course she does.
So we have in lieu fees for parking, but they do not apply to residential projects. So in a case like this, there is a legal building site. They need to have access. There is no alternative access point. So at any way to access this site will result in the loss of at least 1 parking space, and that will not be mitigated elsewhere in the city. So it's just a function of developing the site.
Okay. And then is the driveway, did Public Works look at current configuration of these new lots and the proposed plans for maintaining as best of possible parking spaces? Is there 2 or 3 parking spaces available? And is that documented kind of within this, along the right of
So-
way?
Yeah, so the process for that will occur as a result of a Public Works review after the board approval. So if you look in the resolution, there's a condition of approval that says that the applicant is responsible for submitting a final site plan for street design directly to Public Works. And they will work with the applicant through that process to maximize parking spaces.
I guess, all right, on that same note, my question or challenge is by not being able to see that configuration now, it weighs on how you dictate or how you decide that this is the appropriate driveway access location. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because let's just say they're a foot short from that requirement on the north side of this property. Then my access deliberation would say, oh, the driveway needs to be a foot south. So by not having that information, I can't make the determination that this is the appropriate configuration for access.
It's a good point.
I see what you're saying.
That is a good point. I agree with that. And I also, this is also a question, because there's also a bus stop there. I mean, the sidewalk issue, looks like that the applicant's in agreement with that, but sidewalk issue, but there's also a bus stop there and a trolley stop there. And I just want to make sure, Daniel, that it's not impacting that, because that's used a lot.
Hope I'm not
Yes,
interrupting, but the property owner says that the bus,
Could be wrong, but because of the large mixed-use building that just went in,
Right.
that Trolley no longer stops there.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, it comes
Oh.
around to Crescent, right by Crescent Bay.
Oh, thank
Mhm,
you.
There is no
Okay,
longer.
so it doesn't,
We
okay.
heard that early on. We
'Cause
can
I had
confirm
heard-
that,
yeah.
but we're there all the time when the trolley comes by and it goes around Crescent Bay and stops. There's like a little.
There's a difference, so there's no.
They've
stops?
changed it.
Oh, they've changed it,
Mhm.
okay,
Well, there's the trolley and
Okay,
then there's
that's
the
good.
local stops.
right.
Same,
Right.
I
Have to
mean,
take
we're
a
there
look.
so much, but I would love to confirm it, but I'm pretty sure, and we're there all the time when the trolley, yeah. We were told that stop was taken away based on the big project,
Ah,
mhm.
The trolley comes down Cliff and at Crescent Bay makes a left and there's
It goes-
there's a designated,
there's a designated
The
spot.
local
There.
too.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
changed.
okay.
I've seen, I
thank
walk
you.
right by it. It's on, right by the Crescent Bay
Mhm.
or Crescent Beach.
Right by the beach. at
a-
the-
a-
Okay,
access right
okay.
there. And I've seen it stop there. I mean, I don't know if it also stops, there, it's by Cliff, but I don't see the point of it. so.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, that was a question too. Okay, I know,
And I
Andrea,
just
you
had a quick question. I think I saw you had rope lighting on the plan, but I couldn't find it.
a what?
Like rope light, I call it rope light. It's-
yeah,
Was it there or was it?
Look, I mean, typically we would put those, you know, on
In the
like
stair.
the large, stone pads that
Yeah.
lead to the entry.
Yeah.
Just to make the lighting very subtle. As the stone pads cantilever, we put them on the underside of the stone pad
Mm.
to just like softly graze the ground plane,
Mm.
you know, for safety. I think that's, and there may be some other locations too, but
Okay.
there is some,
But nothing
can-
around the parapet, nothing around the
no,
building?
nothing on the building.
Okay.
No, just walkways.
Making
things-
sure. Thank
things
you.
like that.
Okay, are there any other questions? No questions. Oh,
To clarify a
Yes.
couple of things. So,
thank you.
Ms. Martina has pointed out that on sheet A 1.1, you can see the 2 parking spaces that are on the street. And note 67 says that that parking space will be eliminated. And right under that, note 59 is the street parking to remain. So there will be a loss of 1 space as a result of the driveway access.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, Amber, to that same question, it's like, well, I think that's where the analysis kind of needed to come forward, is that see where the neighboring property is, those where the 2 existings are. But is there enough room that 2 still can exist between the sidewalk there and there? Just to the ocean side? Or on the Desai property, is there a spot for 2 there before their driveway access? Like, that's what I'm trying to balance, that I think what we're doing is we're cutting one length of a car off by the location of the current driveway. If it was reconfigured, there'd be 1 car still kind of south that share the sidewalk with the neighboring property. There's enough width. And then above, there might be 2. And so even though there's 2 now and a red curb, what's the right configuration as we go forward? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Is what's the answer? I understand the issue, but what's the
No,
answer?
I just don't think it was, I don't think it was properly vetted or looked at.
Okay, so is this going to, the question is, and this is the question before we get into deliberations, does this need to be resolved before we can approve this? I see the importance, but you know, I'm not sure what the solution is.
I think it's up to the board to make a call. The plan clearly shows that 1 parking space will be removed and 1 that is existing will remain. Mr. Wiles' question was, is there a possible reconfiguration of the public parking spaces to maximize on-street spaces? And that I don't have an answer
So
for.
whether we can save an additional public
Right.
parking space
Mhm.
in in an area that is definitely challenged with
Mhm.
parking.
Well, it's not only that, it's also the coastal development permit.
That's
of
a good- that's
Where
another-
we're at is that we're not,
Another,
we really need to be careful of limiting parking spots
but
oceanward of Coast Highway.
Board Member Wild, that's a really good catch. I did not think about that. But I know that area very well. I live there, I walk there, and parking's at a premium. So I think the issue's been vetted. I don't have any further questions about it.
If I could just add, it's a 50-foot wide property. The driveway that we're proposing, just so you can kind of factor this into your decision-making process, the driveway is 18 feet wide. So a 50-foot wide property, right now, there's 2 parking spaces in front. Those parking spaces, you know, when the city requires that we add on-street parking, they're 22 feet long. So 2 parking spaces at 22 feet, that's 44 feet. It's a 50-foot property, it only leaves 6 feet. So invariably, when you put a driveway on this property, you're going to lose 1 spot.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, but where there traditionally was like a red curb that is now on sidewalk on a pending approval, that opens up space that's to the south, that a parking spot could be remained, and that probably wasn't vetted at the time for their approval because theirs was just a minor remodel. I mean, it's the street as a whole, it's the right of way as a whole. It's a big question. It needs to be looked at. And right now I'm saying I don't have enough answers for where that right. And it could mean that your configuration for your driveway needs to shift and flip to the other side. So then you're accommodating a spot. I don't know. I don't have that right answer. Maybe there's nothing we can do, but I don't think it was.
Yeah, whether there is or not, unless you can convince otherwise, Horace, and, you know, we need to get on to deliberations here.
Yes.
This needs to be vetted, in my opinion. And it doesn't sound to me like it has been.
Well, in addition to that too, now that I've been reminded that there's no longer a bus stop there, as far as reconfiguration might actually make a lot of sense.
Right, and I
Might be
think we
more.
need to know that before we can say the driveway belongs where it belongs, so.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't mean to
Okay.
get into deliberations, but I want to make sure that we've got as much facts as there are out there, so.
Mhm. Are there other questions? Okay, so we can move on to deliberation. You want to start, Tom? Okay.
Yeah, let me just start with where we were. Yeah, I don't see how we can approve the project tonight, given on that issue, but let me talk about the other ones that are my comments and, I would be otherwise prepared to approve it on these comments and with these conditions. I think overall, it's a great design and it's kind of a classic horse design. There's not a lot of real contemporary in that area. It's pretty cottage and Mediterranean. But given the location of this lot and the fact that there are some contemporary, I think that it meets the criteria. I think the mass and scale is large. I also think that the impermeable area percentage is high. But given the location of this lot and the rather unusual location of the lot, and the fact that the frontage to Cliff is, I think, beautiful and woody, gives a rustic feeling to the contemporary. I think it satisfies neighborhood compatibility, and mass and scale. So let me get to the stone issues and the Desai issues. The stone house is oriented toward the ocean, not surprisingly, because they have nice ocean views from the front. It's very true with the Upper Circle Way homes. Their balconies are there and everything. That being said, they have a backyard that is not just a small area. It is definitely designed to be a living area. And I am concerned about privacy and the scale facing their property. Given how large a lot the applicant has here, it's not too much to ask to consider. If it was a much smaller lot, I might have a different feeling, but given that it's a much larger lot, I do have issues regarding privacy, and, particularly given their backyard. I think that the cantilever needs to be pulled back. I would pull it back to the level of the deck. I think that's more than 2 feet, but whatever it is, that's where I would like to see it. So it doesn't overhang more than the deck is, which I think is the biggest kind of over towering aspect onto the Stones property. I have pondered, and I actually went back and looked at it, whether the deck should go back. And I looked at your floor plan there, and you've designed this house to that be the important area. Not surprisingly, because that's where your view corridor is, and I'll get to that in a second. I think that the podocarpus will provide the privacy on balance, although it was a close call to me, Horst. 12 feet is not going to be enough. I wanted to go 2 feet above the deck. I don't think that will interfere either with sitting views or certainly standing views. So that would be a requirement as far as I was concerned. With respect to the size, I think you have to, in my view, and my board colleagues may differ, I look at each residence separately. They were built, they're approved, they're residences, and the fact that they're for sale doesn't matter to me. They are homes, and they're entitled to view equity, even unoccupied, and even though the developer has 2 separate ones. I think that the fact that you're removing the power lines, is not only great for both the Stones and the Desais. And we're talking view equity here. But I consider that entering into the broader equity question, that you're doing a very positive thing for the neighborhood and everything else. That being said, the proposed second-story structure does severely curtail or cut into their corridor, their view corridor. And that is, I don't know what those trees are going to look like when they're trimmed, but I just got to go with what I see. And everybody made the view corridor, and in the place you made it, they made it, because that's where the low point in the Stones house is. So in my mind, you're taking too much view corridor for view equity. So I thought about how much that needs to be moved back. The request is 10, and I went there with Steve Karakami and Neil as to where they want it. I kind of walked it, I eyed it. I think a reasonable compromise and one that achieves view equity in my mind is to pull it back 5 feet. And so that's where I come out on that. As far as the REP, I just don't see how we can, well, one is the REP, I find clearly it meets the guidelines and everything. The parking issue, which, it does relate to the REP. I haven't heard enough that I can approve the project on that issue. But on all the other issues, those are where I stand. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Louis, okay.
Sure. I ditto a lot of what Tom just said. Obviously, the access is now a concern. So once we square that away, I think it says here in the guidelines that it has to minimize the loss. So once we figure out what's going on, I think we can get past that. The design articulation, I think, is good. I think some of these parapets feel a little extreme, especially on the stone side, as Tom pointed out. I think if you can pull that back. I've been also considering that side deck coming off your living area, the smaller one. It feels like, unless, to Tom's point, you can bring that hedging up enough that it does feel like you're standing there looking down into the stone's life. I haven't decided yet. I want to hear what my other board members have to say about removing that deck. You have the large deck off the back that feels pretty substantial. And that area, if with the window that you have, or the door, I can't recall, most likely sliding, you would be able to see out beautifully. And then if you want to be outside, you'd go out the back area. It's a little deck. It's just nice to have, but I feel like what it takes away from the stones is pretty substantial. But we could discuss potentially doing a hedge option there. Again, once I hear what my board has to say. Design integrity covered. Neighborhood compatibility. I drove through the neighborhood. It's definitely compatible. It's a large home, but I think that the way you've added some relief in your landscaping and in your the way you set it back, and the way it articulates up the hill, it's very compliant. Landscaping appears fine. Privacy was just what I said. The big one was off the on the stone side of the house. I felt like that was intruding. So if we can find a solution there. View equity, always the tough one in the world of empty lots going in between. I think giving a little bit there, the 5 feet to me is the maximum I think you should have to give. It would be important. It would allow the main living space of Neil's property to get a better view. Right now, you've taken a big view down to a peekaboo view for him, and I feel like he needs a little more relief there. So if you could give the 5 feet, I think that's what you also agreed to. That would be fair, and hopefully you can make that up by coming into your pool area there above it. Your plate heights are fine. Sorry, new at this, so I have to take a little time. Don't want to miss anything. That's it. I just want to thank you all for handling the undergrounding on behalf of your neighbors. I think that is beyond generous, and I'm hoping that as this all evolves, that perhaps everybody can get more on board with helping support that with you Just a sidebar. Thank you.
Course, I got to give you some props. This is another one of your cool, modern, very balanced, very beautiful concepts and designs. I love your work. I think you find creative ways to come up with some really cool designs and some really unique lots. And this is a unique lot. And I like the theme and what you're trying to accomplish. I appreciate the applicants for really trying to get out there. You spoke to a lot of neighbors. That's very important in this process. It doesn't mean everybody has to come to agreement. That's why we come to the board. But I really appreciate the efforts you guys really went to try to let everyone know what you're trying to accomplish and try to develop your property. So I appreciate those efforts very much. There's a unique dynamic with this one because I was on the board when we heard the prior project, and it was a pretty large project at the time. And it was a very careful one, and there were a fair amount of considerations at that time. But I had to kind of go back to the design review book, and on the first page of the design review, chapter 1, the property development standards contained in the municipal code represent the potential maximum development for any given property. The actual development allowed will often be less than the maximum allowed by code because of localized conditions identified during the design review process. A proposed development that has no variances from development standard does not have any presumptive development right or entitlement to be built to the maximum specified. So that's like page 1. And when I go and look at some of these comparisons, which Amber, if you can put this up for me, it's taking a pretty large project that was already approved this site and then blowing into it and making the balloon bigger. And I know there's some careful design stuff that can be done that doesn't make it feel so bigger, but there are components to it that I think are exaggerated in some different facets. So when I look at, comparing the two, staff sent me the prior application, so I pulled those numbers from there. But the house got 462 square feet bigger. The ADU, not really talking about, but it got bigger. The garage got 889 square feet bigger. The mechanical, 243 square feet bigger. The deck did get reduction, but there's a lot of replacement with patio space in the Zen courtyard. And so there is decking and outdoor space. The deck, but total space grew 1,300 square feet. The ridge, yes, when we were at the site, you talked about the ridge being lower, but we have to look at the design components. You went from a gabled roof or a pitched roof to flat roof. So we're looking at both the ridge and the eave. So yes, you're lower than the eave by 1.5 feet, but you're higher than the ridge. You're lower than the ridge by 1.5 feet, but you're higher in the eave by 2.4 feet. The floor levels are somewhat comparable. You got a little higher on the upper floor, which is level 1. I said that right. A little higher on the upper floor, flat on the lower. Lot coverage, if you scroll down just a little bit, it's about the same. Open space about the same. So some of those things are there. And then the last call out is the landscape lighting grew quite significantly from 19 to 74, even though your exterior lights got better. But I'm looking at the overall project. It's taller, the eaves are more expanded, and it gives a feel of more mass and scale. And I think that's one of the problems one of the neighbors is having is it does kind of tower a little bit more closer to the property line with some of the features. I'd like to see some of the reductions in the eaves. I'd like you to take another look at the plate heights. Maybe there's some grading components that give you the heights in the ceiling that you want, but lower the profile so it's not as impactful. The landscaping, as mentioned, we can't condition another property to have stuff, but I do think board member Gibbs was on the right path, that the porticarpus does need to be set at a certain height. I do like that it's higher, closer to the railing. I think on a project recently heard and around that line, most of the trees that are in front of you were conditioned at that lower line, power line that's hanging on those poles. So I tried to take a look at that measurement and get your final. When I look at your landscape plan, your podocarpus mature height is 2+ feet.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest, podocarpus 2+ feet is shy from being close to what a podocarpus can grow. So let's take a look at that. Let's get those mature heights cleaned up and let's get those mins and maxes on that page. Okay. And I think that'll add to that. What else did I have for notes? The rear property at large on the last project, it was almost 40 some odd feet back from the rear property. Not saying that you have to go that far back on the upper level, but I think there is definitely a compromise. I'm not quite as comfortable at 5 feet, because I think there's a decent break within the neighboring properties that I think you need to look at. Maybe some angling or get creative, Horst. I know you can do it. I'm not going to say you can't have a deck back there. I think you can because that was part of the prior approval, but we do need to be mindful of the stairs, the configuration of how you traverse through that property and whether you're creating some privacy functionalities on that.
Louis, are you wanting more than 5 feet or less than 5?
More than 5-foot reduction.
Okay, thanks.
But obviously we had a benchmark on the prior approval, so somewhere between there and there is good in my mind. It does kind of block, when I look at design review criteria, it's 15.6 view corridors locate buildings to retain view opportunities through side yards. Even though this is your rear yard, it kind of acts as a side yard, not only for the hotel that's adjacent, but the property that sits behind you. It is a shared and a balanced dynamic, and I understand that. I don't think it's achieved in the current design, so I need to take another look at it. Lighting, and then the tandem parking is part of the design. I'm not as thrilled on tandem parking. I'd like to see more of an access that there's angled parking under the garage. I'm okay with you having more parking under there, but where the cars can ingress and egress individually instead of having to pull one out and put one back in. I think you have the width of the lot that affords you that ability. And then obviously we need to take a look at trying to maximize the on-street parking. And I appreciate the condition or the concession for making the max wide width of the sidewalk for the pedestrian and public right of way. See those changes and I could be encouraged, but I'm not this evening. So thank you.
Okay, well, you've gotten a lot of direction. The one thing that wasn't mentioned, I do think that your landscape lighting is incredibly excessive with 88 lights. So I want you to really scale that down, particularly because you are between, between properties and right next to that, and because of the privacy issue and the looming effect there. So the lighting is a big deal. You have on the back deck, from that side deck to the end of the deck is like 25 feet. And I think those are like those accordion doors or whatever. You can really open it up. And I absolutely appreciate you wanting to have that access area. But I think that you can pull that back a little bit where it's more of a walkway and sort of an extension of that family room. Because with it being 5 feet, I think if you have furniture there, then you really are going to be looming over the neighbors. So I think, we had spoken about that a little bit on site. So I'd like you to take a look at that, even though I know that is going to be a very critical part of your home. But I'm not saying remove that side deck, but I think that you can tweak it a little bit. So that's with the deck. And I also agree that the program needs to be pulled back further toward the south. Your what you're calling, I guess, the middle level, you are right on the setback. I think if you did move that back and then as a result, move that top back somewhat, I think that, and we had spoken around 6 to 8 feet on site. I don't know what the magic number is because it'd have to be restaked, but I think that by pulling that back, I don't really think that you'd necessarily lose program. You have a pretty large courtyard in that middle. Your pool is very large, even though I'm not going to comment on that, but your pool is very large. Some people would like to have more courtyard than pool or more pool than courtyard, but I think that there are areas that wouldn't be right against this, the Stones property that where if you wanted to move more program in that area, I don't think that you necessarily lose program. And, I'm not a stickler for the numbers as far as how large your home is. I think it's all about the mass and scale. And I think you've done a really good job from the street looking at that. I do agree with my colleagues about the parking, minimize any impact for parking. And let me just see if there's anything that hasn't been covered. We mentioned the plate heights. I don't know that the plate heights are a huge issue just because the majority of your program would not really impact, you know, that center section where it's more of a mixed use. It's not really the two condos above you. So I'm okay with that. But I think that the overhang also, particularly on the stone side, and it does block, but as you move that back, depending on how you play with that, I think, you know, take a look at that as well. Landscaping, we've already discussed that. And I think that's it. The only thing is, I just want to also absolutely agree with the sidewalk issue, because there are a lot of, you know, kids, you know, that's the one crosswalk right there, and a lot of kids, you know, so for two people to walk down that is going to be important. I think that's it.
Chair, I have a
Of course.
couple additions.
Sure.
First of all, you know, because this is coming back, I'd express my views on a couple things that were my colleagues raised that I didn't. You know, given the location of this lot, mass and scale is kind of concealed from most vantage points, including from the street. I think it's, you know, my view is it's some important tweaks. You're going to get a big house there because a big house doesn't create a neighborhood mass and scale in my mind. It's all how you do it. And I think that's a common thread, although I'm not going to speak for my colleagues. With respect to pulling back the deck, I mean, I was troubled by this deck, and the chair gave a solution that I think makes a lot of sense, and I would encourage you to consider it, which is pulling back the deck. And since you have the opening in the living room dining area, like I have these doors that sink into the walls, creates an open patio area. And you know, should look potentially to other areas. You have a lot of outdoor patio space on this project. And so notwithstanding, I said, I'm fine with leaving the deck where it is. I'm not so fine after listening to my colleagues. So I would encourage you to seriously consider what the chair said on that. It certainly makes sense to me, and I think it goes a long way to helping the Stones out and having to live with this bug structure overhanging their property. I'm good with 5 feet. I think you've heard some other views. I think the more you pull that back, the more likely you're not going to have a third hearing. So those are my final comments.
Lastly, I did share some photos with staff that will be made in the public record as well.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, what do we have available as far as?
So Horst,
Yes.
would you be able to provide plans by July 3rd? Or could
Yeah,
you do it sooner
absolutely.
than that? Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh, it's my birthday too. No, I've already done that once. No, July 3rd is great.
So if you provided plans by July 3rd, we would bring you back on August 22nd.
I think that gives us a comfortable amount of time to make, you know, meaningful changes.
Okay.
And since we're the only one, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Of course.
Just a couple of quick questions.
Clarifications.
Because I think it's going to help us all. Like, you know, the idea of the reason we did tandem is because tandem, you know, can be accessed by a single driveway 16 feet wide.
Mhm.
If we didn't do tandem and we did a large 3-car wide garage, we'd even be losing more of the street because the driveway, you know, would most likely be wider. So that is one consideration.
Tandem could work, and I'm not saying that
Okay.
it can't. Like, you just take, what I was trying to ask was take another look at it, because there's ways you can bring in, and I've seen in houses done where
Yeah.
it's more of a wide single car garage, but they pull in, but then there's angled parking in the underground garage. So the car can kind of pull out and back out. And then all 4 have access in the garage without moving a single
Okay.
car. Because you have the
Oh.
width, you might be able to utilize the underground space more. I mean,
Mhm.
you're also looking at, you know, a 300 square foot or 300% bigger underground garage space for an ATV and a golf cart and whatever. Take another look at the configuration that makes it more accessible
Okay.
instead of just piled in deeper. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect
And
sense.
I mean, the
we'll
prior
definitely look
application
at it.
had an offset garage to try to minimize that gap. I'm not encouraging you of having 3-car
Okay.
garages, but maybe you do a small one car that accesses your ATV, the golf cart or whatever component in one spot. The other one gives you the room to pull in and then pull to the side.
Yeah.
And then there's a pathway to get to those spaces.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. We'll look at some options. And the
And
other
if
thought
that
I,
can't work, we'll entertain the tandem. It's
Okay.
just one of those things that we do need to opine on as a board.
yeah, and just one more, observation is, in terms of the deck that's off our main living space that goes out toward the Stones property, every board member was correct. The main deck is on the north end.
Right.
And so that deck in question is just to get to the larger deck.
Right.
And I was thinking that, if we eliminated that deck and just, what the deck does is that when you're in the upper level, it edits out the view into the backyard of the Stones residence, if you will, because it's a horizontal plane.
That's a good point.
Yeah, if we remove it, then it's 2 stories of,
Mhm.
structure and, much more, visual sightline. And
Take a look at that. I mean,
We'll look at it.
you're the genius, so.
no, you've given us,
But I
I've
think-
learned a lot
and
from.
doing-
It's a
doing-
beautiful design. And I think
Thank you.
that, I think, I was just thinking that because, and I'm sure the Stones would let you come down. I think, to maybe if you're kind of playing with that a little bit, to look, because when you're standing there, and I can forward you some photos as
Yes.
well, that it just, between that, and the roof overhang, it's kind of like, wow, so and I do think the landscaping will help, but, anyway, you can
Yeah,
take a look at
and
that.
I just want to kind of echo and follow on with that. This is really a stone neighbor issue. And it's a big issue if you stand in their backyard. So I hope you understand where they're coming from with this and how you solve it, whether you eliminate the deck or whether you make it a lip deck, like a 1 or 2 foot, or keeping in the full 5, that should be a collaboration, because that's something that, I'd like to see an agreement with the Stones on. I think that would help us.
Yeah, no, we've had a really good relationship with the Stones, and we can continue that and find a solution that works for both parties. Thanks so much. Great comments.
Great.
Can't wait to get back to the drawing board.
Okay, so August 22nd, I need a motion.
Okay.
Chair, I'll move item number, one sec.
5.2.
Item number 5.2 at 1360 Cliff Drive to be continued to August 22nd.
Second that.
Okay, roll call.
Yes. Board Member Coveney,
Yes.
Board Member Weil,
Yes.
Board Member Gibbs,
Yes.
Chair Neve.
Yes.
That
Okay.
is a 4-0 vote to continue to August 22nd.
Okay. We'll see you soon. Yes, I know. Have a great weekend. Okay, so we do have other business. So the next item is item 6.1, early neighborhood communication presentation.
All right, I'm not going to be long, but I do want to just kind of give some background. This is a subcommittee, neighborhood communications, that was generated out of something that I noticed that other board members have been noticing. And that is that we were getting a lot of complaints by neighbors that they weren't getting sufficient information. And it became kind of like he said, she said. And, there's no way we can adjudicate who's telling, the truth or not. Maybe from both perspectives, they both feel they're telling the truth. And also what was being notified was kind of not adequate, really, to inform the neighbors. A lot of neighbors said we didn't really understand what was going on until the agenda came out. And that is not conducive to having issues worked out in advance of it even going to agenda. I have found that a lot of projects, I think we've all found that compromises and solutions could be achieved much earlier on in the process, which not only prevents potentially a second or third hearing, but comes up with a better design for everyone. And after all, these people are going to have to live together. So the subcommittee was formed to try to come up with improved neighborhood communications. And what we did is we came up with two aspects. One was what the notice was going to contain, and then what the subsequent requirements were going to be that would be set forth in a written document that would be put together by the applicant, all of which would go into the official agenda as an attachment. So everyone would see, what, that the notices went out, what neighbors participated, what their concerns were, and how they were addressed, if at all. And that way, there wouldn't be any guessing, and it would also kind of cause the parties to go through that process, and in going through that process, could resolve it. I did mediation for many years. I was a judicial mediator, and what we looked for was win-win. So let's say an applicant has concerns A, B, and C, and a neighbor has concerns 1, 2, and 3. Well, maybe the neighbor doesn't care so much about A and B, but cares about C. And maybe the applicant, cares about concern 1, but not 2 and 3. So they can trade off and get 2 and 3 and A and B, and then our issues are the C and 3, if I may have gotten the numbers off. But you've resolved something. And maybe in the horse trading, you have concern of the neighbors, that's not a big issue for the applicant, and vice versa, and they solve everything. So that was our desire, and we came up with a list of proposed guidelines that were mandatory. Then it went to council, who came back and said, I thought the ordinance was broad enough to allow mandatory requirements. Council did not think so. They are the city's attorneys, and I fully understand and candidly agree with their position. I think we need to take a conservative approach, so you can't do mandatory requirements without an ordinance. That being said, what they came up with is a best practices. So let me go through them briefly. Again, the idea is to get the necessary information out in front of the impacted neighbors, provide a method for the communications, both in a neighborhood meeting and individual site visits, and then have the applicant provide to the board what neighbors were notified, what neighbors were at a neighborhood meeting, what neighbors they met with in writing. And then they provide a writing stating what the neighbors' concerns were and how they were addressed, if at all. So those all kind of became in guidelines. So let me go through a couple of the points real quick. You can read through it. It's a 2-page document, and then I'd be very interested in the board's comments on the subcommittee's recommendation. The first has to do with the project description. The notice will contain the project description. That's required by the current ordinance, which, by the way, is 2505040C1. And you can look that up. It's summarized in the agenda item. It does require a project description. And one of our proposals was to include in the notice various items which fall under the general designation of project description. When I spoke to City Council, he said that he felt that the City Council, or the City Council, or the City Attorney, I say council in the attorney sense.
Council's council.
He thought that the interpretation of the ordinance would allow us to require specific items that fall within project description. So this is really kind of the fundamental, kind of the linchpin of the whole program, is to get with the notice information on the project. And so the modification that I want the board to consider and to hear from the city attorney on is to keep all the other requirements in here, all the other items in here as best practice, strongly recommended, but do as a requirement that project description means that they will include within the notice. Let me make sure I got the items correctly here. Let me see. Would be site plans, setbacks, floor plans, height, exterior elevations, and landscape plans if required. So if we make that a mandatory requirement that be included with the notice, that will deal with one big concern that we've heard, that neighbors don't know enough about the project until the agenda item comes out a week before the hearing. With that information, it provides the neighbors the ability to really understand the project, to see what their real concerns are. And then the best practices kick in. So I hope I think Louis has some additional items that he might want to consider to be included or to make optional, including having a link for the design plans digitally, that the neighbors could access the plans digitally. And I like that idea as well. And the other thing I would add that's not in the agenda item, proposed guidelines, would be that it includes 3D modeling if available. Okay, then beyond that, I'll summarize them just to make sure it's on the record and everybody understands, so they can ask me any questions that they may have. The strong recommendations are kind of as follows, and I just want to make sure everyone understands them. That the requirements for the notice and the meetings, if there is to be one, occur prior to project zoning plan check clearance. That provides an earlier in the process. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, that one benefit of moving this up, not only providing the information, but the best practices I'll be going through, is it enables changes to be made to the plans before it's kind of set in stone or expectations are set in stone. By the time the item is agendized, the expectations of the architect and the applicant are rather strong that this is what they want. They're less willing generally to facilitate compromise. Thus, we get a question about 5 foot moving it back, or 7 or 8 feet. So the earlier we can do that, the better. And that's where we want to recommend that this requirement, the notice and everything, and the meetings with neighbors and efforts to resolve happen before project zoning plan clearance, check clearance. So that's one point. The next point is the neighbor comments and feedback regarding the applicant proposed project should be centered on the criteria set forth in the 2505 040H, which means center the communications with the neighbors by the applicant who knows the guidelines, with the neighbors on those guidelines. And then early staking is recommended, to get staking up early. By making it a best practice, hopefully we can encourage earlier staking than hearing a complaint that we had at the last meeting that staking just went up and I had no idea. The best practice also includes having the proposed architect being available to respond for requests for communications and share plans, and that the early notice, in addition to what's required by the what we talked, the project description, and this is important, but I think we can only do best practice. Information on how to communicate concerns about the project directly to the applicant or architect, and information on how to participate in a neighborhood meeting or request an appointment to view the project. And I think we, need to be looking at, and I would want as part of the agenda package that goes on, is the notice, the form of the notice that's sent to all the neighbors, so we can see what they're including and what they're not including. And hopefully they will take the best practice of inviting the neighborhood meeting and the meeting with neighbors at their house. That is not required by current ordinances. There's no requirement that they have a neighborhood meeting or meet at the homes. So by making it a best practice, and again, we go back to have all this completed before final plan check is completed, I think could be very helpful. And then lastly, the best practice we're strongly recommending is what's called the neighborhood outreach report. And again, that was designed, was intended by us to be mandatory, but the ordinance doesn't seem to facilitate that. But that will really be helpful. And I think that, and I'll finish let me finish with how I think architects should view this. They may not, but how they should. And the outreach report will, among other things, list the neighbors that attended the neighborhood meeting, neighbors who had individual communications, the dates that those occurred, the issues raised by the neighbors, and the last point, measures taken by the architect and or applicant to address those issues or explanation for non-resolution if applicable. Now, I don't know how many, architects are going to comply with these best practices. I think that most of them will comply with some with all. I think that they will find that by doing this, if they think they have a project that they, like Horst had tonight, where he's, had all these meetings and everything, he's going to want to show, or the applicant's going to want to show that they really, on controversial projects, that they really involve the neighbors, considered their concerns, and have explanations. And the best way of showing us that they've done that is to comply with these best practices by having the notice with what's included in it, made a part of the agenda. And I think if we all agree, that needs to be added to here, because I don't think it's in here. And then have this as best practices so that we can see in the agenda item whether there is a neighborhood outreach report. I think really could help us in seeing much better see where neighbor communications were as of the status of the hearing. But even more important, I think this is going to resolve not a majority. I'm not that, naive about this, but I think it's going to resolve a number, and I'd say not insubstantial, maybe 25% of the neighborhood problems that get presented to the DRB. And also, I think will make a significant dent in avoiding the hostile relations that come out of these DRB meetings sometimes. So those are, I'm interested in what everyone else thinks, and hopefully we can come out with a set of guidelines that we all agree with, that we can approve so that the city can implement.
Everybody's looking at me.
We just all.
Well, since I'm temporary, I guess I will just open my mouth, but okay.
You're temporary, but
I'm temporary, but experienced.
Yep.
Well, first of all, yes, I was on 8 years, and I think in the 8 years, of course, I can think of projects that were controversial, but in my mind, I think most projects were not so egregious that when we start thinking mandatory and reports and documenting and all, it's almost, I think what I would be uncomfortable with would be, say, we're sitting here and we have all this information, and say one architect didn't follow best management practices. I would be a little concerned that, so now do we get punitive? Now do we start saying,
no.
hey, oh, gee, that architect didn't do that. And then that's one thing. But more importantly, the one thing that, from as far as communication and noticing, occurs quite, quite ahead of what we see, right? Before us. And so I think that that would put a lot of pressure on staff and I think it would delay a lot of projects. And I don't want to speak for staff, but in my mind, it would be, okay, so now the stakes go up and notice is out. And okay, I have these, best management is to do this. I think in general, best management practices and communication you're spot on, Tom. You're absolutely spot on. But I think that for all kinds of reasons, in the best case, it's going to occur anyway. In the worst case, it's not going to occur regardless of what you do. And so I think that, to say, okay, you can get my vote, or I'm digging in my heels, and now last minute changes, and let's have it restaked, and let's do this. I guess, to me, it loses a little bit of that streamlining. I think that we did work so hard to try to streamline the process. And so I'm putting on my old streamlining hat and thinking, this doesn't sound like streamlining to me. So that's kind of my
Let me
gut
give a
reaction.
clarification.
But okay.
I just want to give a
I
clarification.
just have one more point, and then you can. But
Okay.
But the thing that I found with noticing that was consistent was that many neighbors, when they're noticed, they don't really know that there's actually a process where they can participate. And so they'll say, oh, yeah, well, I got this notice, but I didn't know that I could oppose it, or I didn't know that there was, those of us that are doing this, and, I'm sure certainly staff, you think that that's kind of a no-brainer. But many, many times, so I guess my thought, and a lot of those points that you're making, if in the notice it said, dear neighbor, this project's going up, there are links, you can go to the city, you can contact the architect, you can find out more information, and you do have a voice, and somehow let them know that they have a voice.
Yeah, that's it. Let me just give real quick one
Then-
clarification.
Anyway, I'm
This
finished.
isn't,
That-
this is intended to only apply to new construction or major remodel. That's number one. Number two, I wish I had the batting average. I've seen a lot of problems. I mean, I can give you a list of projects where I think this could have been helpful. And like I say, it may be 25%. Third is, it's not really that much. If, we can talk about when notice needs to be sent. Well, we're talking about notice with those items, just those items. And a cover letter that does, say, it's not, we can't do it by ordinance, but best practice is to give in the notice the information, how they can participate, neighbor meeting, come out, individual come out to the site. And then the last thing it requires is to be done right before it's agendized, is a neighborhood, I think we call it a neighbor outreach report. That's all. So it's notice and a neighbor outreach report. That's all that's additionally required. And I don't think that puts that big of a burden. So
Well,
anyway.
I guess, and maybe what the flag that I saw or I was reacting to would be like before final plan check or final plan check and stuff, because then it's like, okay, so now you're kind of waiting, and I don't know, I mean, I'd like
Right,
to
we're
hear
talking about
staff.
sending the
Yeah.
notice before final plan checkoff, so the process can start instead of, right. We thought about it starting the process much earlier or even later when the agenda is put on. And we thought that prior to, planning sign off would be a good time to send a notice.
Yeah, Tom, I think you guys did some really positive work by trying to organize this, and I do think this is really good information. Like Debbie said, I am hesitant in trying to make a new requirement, but I am always in favor of trying to just give people the right tools to do the right thing. I'm not in favor of saying the few bad apples that we do have to change the whole program, because even if we do this, there's still going to be the few bad apples that screwed up. And they don't get my vote because they screwed it up. right? That's how I view it, but I can't, I guess I'm under the impression that I want to see this turn into more of a tool that encourages people like this is stating to just really do the simple things. Communicate early, communicate often, stay accessible, understand the issues. I think architects that understand the issues can come to us with they've chosen to solve the issue or they can't. Most of them do. Most of them know where the issues are. I'm really careful that I want to keep this thing balanced because not all issues can be solved with the design. That's why we're here to say up or down on some of these kind of more subjective viewpoints. I always say that wrong. But like, I want to encourage this. Like, I want to see this kind of, I guess, shrink up a little bit and maybe have some more call out action words, like communicate often, or like what the intent is, because this can get a little, no offense, legally, and they'll just, no, I know. Right. But like, and maybe it's just, it's my own person. Yeah, it's in my own personality. Like, they'll look at this and they'll be like, okay, because there's no call to action. There's no like checklist, or there's no tangible things that they're supposed to take away to actually go do. I'm much more in favor of them doing the right things than trying to mandate it. And I do get how a mandate can be beneficial, but I do think most of our architects do it pretty well, especially the local ones that have done this process a long time. I mean, look at a Todd Skandarian, a Morris Skandarian. They really are out there. Marshall has his moments of really being out there, and not James Henry Ward. We have some of these great characters, but we need to encourage like the architect community to also help encourage this within the profession, because there are folks that show up and they've never read the guideline book. And that's a problem because we can see it in their drawings. If we come back with this, like, I want to see it more of a visual tool, but I think all the information's there, and that this is great work.
Yeah, let me respond to a couple of points, because this kind of highlights, I think you made some very good points that kind of highlight the issues. You know, every meeting we've had neighbors complain. Everyone. Some more than others, some projects a lot more. We had that Circle Way project where we had 15. So, you know, it's not resolved prior to the hearing. And in a high majority of those people don't, complain, I didn't get notice, I didn't understand the project, the staking just went up. It happens in my view a lot. In majority cases, no. But if you just take the new construction or the major remodels, particularly where it's an impactful project, this probably happens in 60, 70, maybe 80% of those. I mean, there are some projects that don't have any objection because the architect goes through these steps and more. The other problem that I have with just kind of leaving it to the architects, if you don't have a framework to do stuff, people are busy doing other things. Unless you make it doing the right thing mandatory, you're going to lose a percentage. If you can't make it mandatory, at least set forth what are best practices to follow. Now, you raised an important point, I think, Debbie, about, well, is it punitive? It's not punitive any more than us addressing the concerns at DRB is punitive. In other words, it's best practices. If they don't follow it, every board member is responsible. We apply the guidelines. We take it as we see it. We can even, if we said, hey, you don't have to follow this because there's no consequences, you're probably not going to get people to follow it that closely. But as far as punitive, it's as punitive as the board wants to make it. It's not punitive by the guidelines.
I thought too. So
But I think, it's my impression that many of these guidelines already exist. They're supposed to have a neighborhood meeting. They're supposed to work with the neighbors. They have to put stakes up 21 days in advance. A notice does go out. Now, what, 30% of the residents or the homes here are absentee
All they
owners,
get is a card now,
you know.
right? Isn't that all they get?
So, but I guess, but I mean, I've gotten notices, you know, and
Is it a card?
well, no, I
Right.
think, well, I've gotten both. I mean, sometimes neighbors will reach out and they'll write a little letter, you know, you're going to be noticed and that, I mean,
Yeah.
some, you know, fall over, you know, do backflips to try to get
Yeah. I
support.
don't think there's any effective
You know,
guidelines out now.
But I think, but it's my understanding that, you know, working, and you guys work with architects all the time, that all of that is really encouraged. Now, some of them, and I won't name them, I know for a fact, you know, will sit here and say, oh yeah, I had a neighborhood notice, but they really did not have a neighborhood notice. You know, there are some that, you know, that really, really take it to heart. And we have all seen those projects and how smoothly they go through. So, and also I think many architects, it's not just the architects, I think a lot of applicants, they'll dig their heels in, and oftentimes the architect could be talking till they're blue in the face, and until they hear it from the board,
Yeah.
they're not going to change their mind.
Mhm.
Fine.
So, you know,
So I-
anyway.
This
I-
isn't- this doesn't.
Let,
force
let
you
me,
to be
let
any
me
of that.
just put, just so I get it out of my head, because my
Those are-
memory is
those
so
are-
small, I won't remember. So the noticing, I think, definitely needs to be stepped up. And I think that's easy to do, and that could be, you know, just a request that we put out to the architects that I still don't know how to quite use this.
That you include the items that I talked
Yeah,
about.
that, thank you. That you say, these are the things that need to go in the notice, and it has to be a render or a floor plan or something that lets them see it. And then you have to put the onus on the neighborhood. We can't spoon feed everybody to say, you need to come and speak about your each, you know, look at this. And you say, it is up to you. If you have a concern, you need to reach out to the architect. Here's the number. And this is your chance to speak, and whatever, we can verbalize it in a way that's concise and puts the onus on the neighbors to know they have a voice. And if they want to be heard, they have to do it by this time in this manner. And that's that. And then I think we can send a letter to the architects, kind of giving them like there's a slightly a new sheriff here now. We're going to tighten it up. We want you to really make an effort. If we see you haven't made an effort, that's frowned upon. You know, we encourage you to participate in the community in a way that will benefit everybody in the long run. That's it. We can't mandate it. We can't say we're going to put you in jail. We're going to not approve your project. There's nothing we can do except encourage them to be more participatory. As far as saying, you know, you go meet with the neighbors or get together before the plan. Great in concept. That sounds like a complete disaster, because to me, it's like you're going to get all these neighbors saying, I don't like that fence. I don't think that's there. That's a dandelion. I don't want that taken out. And then it becomes just like, we can't come to us. And then everybody's like, so it's going to be, I don't know where to look. It's going to be trouble anyway. It's going to happen because one person's gnome is another man's nightmare. So it's like, you can't feed them all. You could get a little input, but that's what the notice would be for. And that would be the details in the notice that would then say it drives you to the architect, and the architect needs to make that connection. And then the neighbor would come to the hearing and say, I called the architect. He never called me back. I sent him an email. He never emailed. Then we can handle stuff in that regard. But I doubt if a neighbor reaches out to the architect that he's not going to reach out to them. So that's that. That's my check. I'm just checking that up. I like the early staking. Anytime I think you can get stakes up and everybody's alerted, that's great, because it makes everybody go, what's going on over there? Like what happened to your point last week with Morningside. Someone had put that one ridge stake up and they were like, oh my God. It was like, but it wasn't what they thought, but I get the panic, but it does make you look. So that's potentially something I think is a great idea. And then, yeah, I think that's it. I always would like to see more renders like what Horst does here. You know, I think it's very helpful because it's so hard to picture. And sometimes people just see sticks and think, oh my God, it's so big, but then they don't realize it's just an awning or it's just you know, the eave. Yeah. So anyway, that's it. And I thank you for your effort.
I'm not sure where we stand, because I've heard a lot of good ideas and some, you know, I think, let me see if I can summarize where I think the consensus is. And then maybe we need to kind of think about this and kind of go back. Because I am a believer in, kind of offering what a good procedure is, because people oftentimes don't don't process it.
Mhm.
And I'd like to build in some procedure that kind of considers what you're all talking about. So I think we're good with the notice,
Being
with the
more
project,
expanded. Yeah.
with the project description, including what I suggest here, which is the site plan, setbacks, floor plans, height, exterior elevations.
Yep.
Number one, landscape planning required. So with respect to the notice, if available, is what I have.
Through a link or through.
Louis, can you turn on your mic?
No, I don't want to make the notice requirement too thick either, so I think what we talked about is the things that really impact.
You can highlight those, but drive them to a link where they can get more further.
Yeah, because what I'm going to
information.
do is I'm going to do a revision and we'll bring it up for another meeing, so.
And just
we're-
get
we're
with
on
the
same page.
high.
But the notice would be project description with those items. The second would be the notice would need to go out before planning checkoff, final planning checkoff. Is everyone good with that?
Is that normal?
We are encouraging the architects to send it's already required in the code, the
Yeah.
early neighborhood notice. We are encouraging them to send it prior to or right after staff is completed their plan check. So in that case, staff knows that there is some viable project that the architect can then go discuss with their neighbors. Doing it a little bit earlier, we have no idea what preliminary plans would be shown.
Right, we can do it.
Yeah.
We can, how about within, 5 days of staff finals?
I don't know that we could require.
I'd
it.
like
We're
to get
just-
it as early as possible. That makes sense.
So then that would be at the point that the applicant is notified that the plan check has been cleared.
So why don't we do it within 5 days of notification that plan check is cleared? All right, then we kind of go to what the notice is going to say.
Yeah. Call to action.
So MJ, there already are a lot of architects just do the neighborhood.
Totally, yeah.
And they are productive. So I think the notice should, that, again, there's no specification in the code as to what the notice needs to say. But I think it would invite, I don't want to overstate. I think we're a consensus on invite neighborhood meetings or on-site. So the architect would invite hearing, and this kind of.
So are you talking about the notice? Or are you talking about?
The notice, it's
Okay.
going to go with all those things.
Okay.
And I think this would address your comment, MJ, and maybe yours as well, Debbie. The notice would say that the architect invites neighbors who have concerns or issues to contact them either for a neighborhood meeting or for on-site. So in other words, invite neighbors to reach out.
Yeah, it's like a call to action for the neighbors.
Yeah, so it puts the ball at that point in the neighbors,
Yeah,
um,
and whatever legal.
pocket.
term
Now,
needs to
the
be.
only other thing that I'm not getting consensus on, but I want you guys to think about, and maybe when I come back with a revised this, which I'm not going to change anything legal that you guys have done in here. I can do that because I'm a lawyer. I still am a lawyer. And you guys would need to sign off on it as well, but I'm gonna simplify it along the lines Louis said. Is I would like the architect to file this, and we can abbreviate it, the neighborhood outreach report, because it does kind of encourage people to, one, do the reaching out instead of having, even with Horst, I mean, I want to pick particular architects. I get an architect who says, yes, I've met with them, and then they said this, and another architect says, no, they didn't. So having the architect come back with the names of and addresses of neighbors with whom they had communicated and the dates of the communications.
Mm.
Now, I
So
would
I'm gonna
prefer.
jump in. I'm only going to jump in. I know where you're going. I just want to throw this out there. Some of these neighborhoods, because you have to do a 300 square foot radius.
No. 300 feet, right?
300 feet, yeah, 300 feet, if it's circle, yeah, obviously, 300 feet. That could be a lot of people. And if some of them really aren't affected, you
Oh,
know.
most
and-
people don't, just so you
So,
don't get
so
ahead.
just to clarify, the code currently requires early neighborhood communication, and it requires the architect to send a notice to 300-foot radius.
Right.
That's already required.
Right,
Right,
but to
and this
actually
shows what
say
it-
that
what's
they
in-
contacted them is different. Isn't that what you're saying? They
No,
actually have to
what we would put in
knock
the
on the
notice.
door kind of thing.
No, they would send it, mailed it.
Okay, that already's happened.
Oh, yeah, already happening.
okay,
We're
so
going to increase what's going to be in the notice. Right now, it's like a card.
They had to go and see all these people.
Oh, God, no. No, the notice is going to go out to the 300 people with the basic design information. The written notice is going to say, we invite you to call me if you have any concerns or questions about the project. And we can either do that the architect can either invite it to be done at a neighborhood meeting or, individual site inspection. The number of people is not not massive. It's, on controversial projects, it could be up to 10 or 20. There's only been like 1 or 2 since I've been on the board, but there's generally in the range of anywhere from 2 to 8 is kind of the sweet spot. So it would just have that information. Now, I don't feel a consensus here on C and D in the proposal, which is to include in the neighborhood outreach report issues or comments raised by the neighbors and the measures taken. Unless you guys say I'm wrong and there is at least 3 people here total or 2 of you that think those are good ideas, I happen to, then those should go away and we'll just do the names and addresses of neighbors with whom you communicated and the dates of communication and just make it a really easy thing to file.
I think just
Go
to
ahead.
that specifically, I'd soften number C to make it more just that you understand, like you've taken in the feedback. But I'd eliminate D because
This also keeps, I kind of like that because that causes the architect, again, this is best practice. It causes the architect to at least think about the concerns raised.
revisit some of the language that's in the guidelines. Just maybe try to soften that a little bit because it's more that they just understand it. They understand the issues. Yes, it's implied that they tried to design around it to mitigate issues, but there's often times where we have neighbors that are extremely egregious, and I don't want to feel that they have to appease every neighbor.
So are you guys good with kind of me softening 2C and then deleting 2D? You're a little concerned still, Debbie?
Because I think the architects are already encouraged to have this neighborhood meeting, not when it's noticed, but early on. They're designing for what, a year or 2 years or something. I mean, they're working on this for a long time. So they're encouraged already in the code that they should be working with the neighbors and soliciting input and all of that, right? So by the time the notice gets out, their plans are kind of cooked, right? So, and they're going to know, gee, yep, there's going to be a view impact here. There might be a privacy here. There's these guys don't like a pool, whatever it is. I think that when the notice goes out, I agree that perhaps inviting, and it's going to be more immediate.
Kind of an individual site
immediate.
inspection?
It'll be an individual rather than a neighborhood.
I think
because
that-
the neighborhood should have been,
They've already happened.
should have happened a long
I
time
kind
ago.
of, I agree with that.
Well, Tom, I don't mean to be short, but I know we're running long and this debate could go on for hours.
Well, I just want to get the, the
Right, but
parameters
I
of
mean,
what to come back with. I think
I-
we're close.
To try to close out in like a couple minutes because I need to get them to
Okay.
bed.
Well, I think we're close.
Didn't think we'd be running 2
Okay, so
hours.
I think we're at the end here. So what I'll do is I'll revise this. I'm going to leave in 2C. I'm going to limit it. 2C, it says in the neighborhood outreach report will be, in addition to A and B, which are just names and dates, would be issues or comments raised by the neighbors during these communications. And I'm going to soften it and tie it to the guidelines. And then with respect to the notice, it would say, you know, I think we'll have something in there about we encourage prior, early in the process, neighborhood meetings. But with respect to once they get the real information on the project, to invite neighbors to address the concerns, either in writing or for a site inspection. Okay. And then we can kind of, hopefully the next one, we can kind of hone it down to something that we can get past.
And again, my one suggestion is to try to make it more visually and more the actionable things that they can do on one page, and then here's your information.
Yeah, well, it's going to get shortened to one page anyway, because we're going to take out the summary of the ordinance, which is half of the first page. But I totally get you. It needs to be simple, straightforward.
But thank you.
So, all right. No, I think this was really productive. I think I have a good idea of what, and I think it's going to be, it's a start. I mean, we see how it goes. Other boards may feel that additional changes would be helpful, or getting rid of the guidelines altogether. Who knows? All right. You need to go to your kids.
Okay, with that, if there's no other business, any legal business, any staff issues, anything, welcome, Ashley.
Welcome, Ashley.
And Michelle, you're hiding back there.
Michelle, I know you're hiding, but
I had no idea. So you were
And,
hiding from us.
with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Debbie.
Sorry, adjourn to June 13th.
Sorry, adjourned to June
I can't
13th.
believe it's
Thank you.
June. We're going to be in summer.
Thank you guys for tolerating.